I was having but Rico from RicoScores. We just did a video breaking down the starting defense as of just a few days ago. Now today we're here to talk about the starting Commanders offense as of today, August 3rd. We've had 8 days of training camp so far, and this is what the starting offense looks like up to this point. And we're doing this in 11 personnel just simply because I want to identify the top 3 receivers, the 1 top tight end, the 1 top running back, of course the 1 top quarterback, and of course the 1 starting group of offensive line. So that's the way I wanted to do it. Maybe if I experiment a little bit more and start diving into other offenses, maybe we could do that. But of course we're here to look at the graphic as well, so we're going to go position group by position group and show you the starters as of right now from what we're hearing and seeing from training camp. And then also at the end we're going to show like an entire graphic of what they would look like if they hit the field together in 11 personnel with names and pictures. If you saw the defense version of this video, then you already know what you're getting into. But before we dive into all of that, make sure you stiff arm that like button, stiff arm the subscription button, stiff arm the bell next to that subscription button so you get notification each and every time I release an informative and opinionated video just like this one. Make sure you stay tuned, follow the content. Really appreciate y'all for staying tuned and keeping up with all of my training camp updates. We're 8 practices in. Technically I believe they practiced today, but I think it's just simply we don't have access to it. So no media members are there, no fans are there, we don't know what's going on. I'm hearing that it was a shorter practice, so they just were like, nah, we can't allow people to see it. We're gonna work on a few things strategically, maybe start preparing ourselves for the joint practices with the Jets and all of that type of stuff. So that's why we're not getting anything from there. But again, make sure you leave a like on this video, make sure you comment on this video, and let's dive into this video. Let's get it. Adam. And just as a disclaimer, of course, offense is heavily rotational. Defense will be just schematically because Joe Wood Jr. and Dan Quinn want to do that. But by nature, defenses aren't as rotational as what this Commanders defense will be this year. But offensively, you're always going to be rotational, really no matter the scheme. Now, some schemes may be more rotational than others, and especially this scheme, we already know that Cliff Kingsbury may go out there with some 2 tight end sets quite often. We may go out there with 2 running back sets. We may go out there with just 4 wide receivers. That's the nature of his offense at his base core, 4 wide receiver sets. But people have noticed that back in with the Arizona Cardinals, when he was their head coach, they did utilize their tight ends more than people expected. They also ran the ball more than people expected. The air raid offense that he likes to utilize and run is by nature a very pass heavy offense. It's called the air raid because they're just throwing deep bombs all the time by nature at his very core. But again, Cliff Kingsbury, especially like his later years as the Arizona Cardinals head coach, definitely started to utilize running backs and tight ends and feature them more often. Even from the time that Zach Ertz was there, before he got hurt, he was actually having a pretty good season with them, looking like his Eagles self at one point in time. But again, the main point is we're just here to break down, if we had 11 personnel and we're allowed to have 3 starting wide receivers, 1 starting running back, 1 starting tight end, what would that offense look like? And I want to emphasize, as of today, this could change. We could get to the preseason, we could get to the regular season, this could end up being completely different. But as of today, what does it look like? And I'm sitting here trying to record this video and I'm seeing my dog Anthony Edwards going crazy against Puerto Rico right now. It is so distracted. I'm trying to get this video done, but golly, man, my boy cooking over there. But either way, quarterback, this one should be like very obvious. Like quarterback, we should just, let's go ahead and get this out the way. First of all, it's the leader of the team, so that's why I wanted to talk about it first. But also, I feel like it's far more obvious than people are even acting like it is on some side of the media. Of course, Dan Quinn and those guys are trying to downplay it, but even Kay Adams straight up asked him after practice yesterday, why is Jaden Daniels not the starter yet? And then Dan Quinn had to basically go down his exact spiel that he explained in another press conference where he said, like, it's just like an overall competition thing we're doing for the entire team. Everybody has to earn their starting role, and I kind of like it to an extent. For the Jaden Daniels situation specifically, I'm I'm not exactly with it. But for the rest of the team, like Terry McLaurin is not being treated differently from any other receiver on the depth chart on the roster. Same thing with Jonathan Allen amongst the defensive linemen. Just because these guys were starters and premier players for the previous regime does not mean that they're automatically going to be that here. So everybody has started from the exact same starting point. That's why in voluntary OTAs, they were mixing it up with starters, with backups, second stringers, third stringers. Everybody played with everybody just to kind of get a feel of who actually is going to stand out. Now, of course, naturally, things fell into place. Terry McLaurin is your number one receiver, obviously. Jonathan Allen, Deron Payne are your best interior defensive linemen. Things naturally fell into place, but everybody started from a base point of you're competing against these other guys. Jonathan Allen, you're competing against Fedarian Mathis, John Ridgeway, and all of these other defensive linemen on the team. Everybody starting from, but I mean, going into training camp, we kind of already know who the starters were, which takes me back to Jaden Daniels, because voluntary OTAs, Marcus Mariota and Jaden Daniels were going back and forth with who was getting the most starting reps in the day, or really just getting all of the starting reps in the day. And then we got to mandatory minicamps. I don't think Jaden Daniels took a non-starting rep the entire 3 days of mandatory minicamp. He was the starting quarterback, I believe, every practice, every single rep, every 11 on 11s and 7 on 7 periods. Then we get to training camp, and then suddenly they kind of take it back a little bit, and it's like Jaden Daniels back and forth with Marcus Mariota again. Jaden Daniels starts one day, Marcus Mariota starts the next. But now we're starting to put together recently consecutive days of Jaden Daniels starting. And even just beyond those clues right there, Jaden Daniels is just straight up better than Marcus Mariota. And we're not talking about because he was drafted second overall, so you're supposed to play him early. Why would you take a quarterback that early if you're not going to start him week one? We're not even talking about that. We're not even talking about the natural talent that Jaden Daniels may be faster, stronger arm, just a better athlete and things like that. We're not even talking about that. We're talking about pure quarterback nuance. The things that Marcus Mariota is supposed to be better at and further ahead than Jaden Daniels at, as far as like nuance and IQ awareness, going through your progressions and delivering the ball to the correct guy, coming to the right answers pre and post snap, changing protections at the line, getting to your fourth read quickly and getting the ball out of your hands accurately and things like that. Like the veteran nuance things that take time. Not, that we can debate about Jaden Daniels versus Marcus Mariota as far as physically gifted, just natural God-given ability, but you would just assume that Marcus Mariota was supposed to be ahead of Jaden Daniels when it comes to the mental stuff, the things that you usually gain through time of playing in the NFL. Jaden Daniels is ahead of him even in those areas of skill sets and things like that. So it's just pretty much a wrap. It's already, everybody knows. Jaden Daniels probably knows. Shouts out to Jaden Daniels for not, forcing the issue, just chilling, letting Dan Quinn do his thing, sending the message to the team that he wants to send. But everybody knows Jaden Daniels is the starter, even with the way that the players interact with the guys and even talk about them. Terry McLaurin, Jahan Dotson, and even Bobby Wagner, but more specifically to the Commanders, I've never seen Terry McLaurin and Jahan Dotson talk about a quarterback like this. Now, they've always been very professional, especially Terry McLaurin dating further back than Jahan Dotson with his time on this team. Through all of the quarterbacks that Terry McLaurin's had to deal with, he's never talked poorly about a quarterback. He's always going to up them as much as possible, but you can tell that there's just a different level of being enamored with Jaden Daniels. There's like a new shine in Terry McLaurin's eye that we probably have never seen. I mean, the way he talks about him is on a whole different level. Again, he hyped up Sam Howell. That's his quarterback. That's his boy. He hyped up Taylor Heineke. We'll talk about how he always gives me a chance. He hyped up Carson Wentz even a little bit. I mean, every quarterback that's been here, Terry McLaurin has been a very professional guy in saying everything that's supposed to be said. It seems like with Jaden Daniels, he's going the extra mile of like, man, this is like real hope. This is real belief. Like, this guy is like actually really one of them ones. And then even just from how other players, again, even guys like Bobby Wagner, the leader that he is, the proven track record that he is, future Hall of Famer that he is, the way that he even talks about Jaden Daniels on the Kay Adams show after practice, that he was even laughing and talking about how Jaden Daniels not only feels like he's the KD of football, but also feels like he's the KD of basketball. And just like the way that they interact with each other, you can tell it's just a starter-to-starter interaction, and that Bobby Wagner has the utmost respect for Jaden Daniels and looks at him as like an equal, not just a random quarterback that we just drafted. So I know I spent a lot of time here, even though this was fairly obvious, but I really wanted to break down why Jaden Daniels is obviously the starter but still at the same time not being named the starter yet. I'm pretty sure it's going to happen very soon. I wouldn't be surprised if by the time we leave the Jets joint practices and that first preseason game against the Jets, Jaden Daniels is already named the starter, so we can go ahead and get that ball rolling. He needs as many starter snaps as he can possibly get. He's a rookie, and I know Dan Quinn trying to find that perfect balance of everybody earning their starting spot, but also to a certain point, we need to go ahead and name him a starter as soon as possible so he can go ahead and start gaining chemistry with his offensive line, his starting unit, his receivers and things like that. Get as many passes up to Terry McLaurin as possible in practice rather than still throwing passes to guys that have no chance of making the team. So we need to, there's like a fine line of, let him earn it, but also go ahead and give it to him so we can get the work, so he can start gaining that chemistry and developing that connection to the guys that actually matter on the team. Now moving on to the running back position, Austin Ekeler. And I know this may be a surprise to some people. I mean, it's kind of back and forth because Brian Robinson was already here, even though Adam Peters, Dan Quinn completely cleaning house. It doesn't really matter who was already here. Everybody's starting on a clean slate. And then I can see the other side with Austin Ekeler. He was the free agent brought in. He's the more proven. He was like the NFL's best touchdown creator, touchdown magnet. I mean, he just equaled points just a couple of years ago. Even though he had a fairly down year last year, you could argue somewhat of a down year, maybe even the year before that. But I mean, this guy is a touchdown magnet, but he is getting up there in age. So there's like positives and negatives to both running backs. Now, of course, like Dan Quinn has said, and I actually do believe this part, even though like with the Jaden Daniels thing, I mean, I just feel like that's just sending a message to the team. Again, we're just trying to make sure everybody earns it. But I believe Dan Quinn when he says the Austin Ekeler and Brian Robinson are pretty much neck and neck. And it's not a 1-2 punch, or one guy out first and the second guy out after him. It's really about equal, and it may just be matchup based. Maybe certain defenses, Austin Ekeler's built better to handle them. Maybe certain defenses on another week, Brian Robinson's better set up to basically counter what they do defensively. So, I do agree, and I definitely feel like Dan Quinn is not lying when he says that they're neck and neck right now, but based on what I've seen and heard so far through training camp practices, I would have to give and it's a very slight edge, very, very minimal, but I would give the slightest edge to Austin Ekeler. If we go out there in 11 personnel, you can't have two running backs on the field in 11 personnel. I think Austin Ekeler would, when in doubt, be the guy out there. Now, you could argue maybe Brian Robinson would be more so the first down guy. Austin Ekeler would be more so the third down guy, like the receiving back, even though I feel like both of them can do both better than what they were giving credit for, especially Brian Robinson. I feel like Brian Robinson is a far more deadly receiving back than people give him credit for, even in his fan base, in my personal opinion. So I feel like both of them can do both. And you could argue that, yeah, Brian Robinson first down, Austin Ekeler third down. But if we had to play a game, who would get the most snaps? I think it may actually be Austin Ekeler, especially if we're in a situational football moment where it's like 2-minute offense, 4-minute offense. It's the end of the game. We need to score. We need our best players, our best playmakers on the field. It would probably be Austin Ekeler who they trust the most right now, mostly because I've heard Brian Robinson, even though he just had a big touchdown run yesterday, even though you could honestly probably give most of the credit to the offensive line. So that's great news for the offensive line. But Brian Robinson did have a big touchdown run yesterday. They ended up getting Fadarian Mathis pretty much cussed out by defensive lines coach Daryl Tapp for everybody to see. And I mean, his roster spot is not looking safe at all. At this point, I'm probably doubting Fadarian Mathis makes this 53-man roster. But either way, my point is Brian Robinson most recently had a big touchdown, but Austin Ekeler has been Mr. Consistent. Brian Robinson has fumbled recently. I've only heard one fumble between both of these running backs so far in training camp. Brian Robinson fumbled because I believe that was the one where Mike Sanders still snuck up behind him and punched it out. We can't have that, Brian Robinson. And that's crazy too, because Austin Ekeler, if anything, is the guy that's known for having a fumbling problem going into this season. This offseason between Brian Robinson and Austin Ekeler, I mean, even obviously Austin Ekeler has played in more games than Brian Robinson has so far, but even just on a per game basis, Austin Ekeler fumbles far more often than Brian Robinson. But so far this training camp, I forgot who exactly said it, but one of the media members that's been going to the practices literally said that Austin Ekeler has been protecting the ball with his life. There's been no shot at anybody forcing a fumble on him so far. That's clearly something that he's focused on this training camp, this offseason, to walk into the regular season with. And then also I remember a play play where Jaden Daniels was able to throw a deep touchdown bomb to Terry McLaurin, and the only reason that play was even able to happen was because Austin Ekeler had a great blitz pickup against Bobby Wagner, the Bobby Wagner. And I like Brian Robinson's potential as a run blocker. He's been improving, but Austin Ekeler does seem more proven in that way. So just, in various random little reasons, like the margins are very small, I would have to give Austin Ekeler the very, very slight nod. This is not just obvious. This is not demonstrative. This is very, very marginal. Austin Ekeler, I'll give him the starting running back spot if I had to pick one. Then wide receiver wise, this is probably the most obvious of this entire video. Terry McLaurin's your 1, your X. Jahan Dotson's maybe your Y or your Z. I'm not exactly sure. Maybe he's your Z because then maybe Luke McCaffrey is the big slot. Either way, Jahan Dotson's your 2 and Luke McCaffrey is probably your 3, even though I'm hearing great things from Luke McCaffrey. First of all, my boy Tyler Owens has been hooping training camp. He has 2 interceptions already. Is that the most interceptions from any player so far in training camp? That's my boy. But Luke McCaffrey put that absolute alien freak athlete onto the ground with a block, like completely pancaked them, sent them on the floor, like just craziness. Luke McCaffrey's very aggressive when it comes to blocking. That's going to be huge, and that's going to allow him to be on the field more. The receivers that can block well, especially with how much Anthony Lynn and Cliff Kingsbury wants this offense to run the ball, between Jaden Daniels' legs and all of the excess of running back talent that we have in this group, we're going to run the ball a lot, and the receivers that can block well are going to make this team and going to play often. Dyami Brown, that's why it's quite likely that he makes the team and probably plays quite often, because you could argue he's our best blocking wide receiver. Dan Quinn even gave him the compliment that whenever it's a scramble drill, the X's and O's are cooked. We're just out here, who's gonna make a play? Jaden Daniels running around trying to see what can happen. Dyami Brown is the receiver that he pointed out that's really dependable as far as getting open for the quarterback when he's just panicking and just looking for somebody. So you could even make an argument that Dyami Brown may even as of today be wide receiver 3, but I'm definitely projecting by week 1. And this is a as of today thing, but I think Luke McCaffrey, even as of today, with how much they invested in him, picking him in the 3rd round and as many starting snaps I've seen him get, I think he is your wide receiver 3 already. But Dyami Brown is probably a close 4. I'm not gonna lie. You have a lot of other receivers making plays too. I'm hearing great things from Davion Davis. He's been out there balling with the starters and even has been gaining in chemistry with Jaden Daniels himself. And if you're gaining chemistry with the starting quarterback, the franchise quarterback, that holds a lot of weight as far as your chances of making this team. But you have Olamide Zaccheaus, you have Casimir Allen, you have Bryson Tremaine, who's the 6'5", the only tall receiver we have on roster. The only receiver we have on roster taller than Luke McCaffrey, who's 6'2", and Bryson Tremaine is 6'5". We have a lot of receivers making noise lately, but this would easily be the starting 3. Terry McLaurin and Jahan Dotson, just to let you know, I know we skip over them a lot because we expect greatness from them, but I do want to take some time to really show some appreciation for how great they've been in training camp so far. I've only heard of one Terry McLaurin drop. Jahan Dotson has had his days where he looked completely uncoverable, and I just feel like a lot of people don't really focus on those guys and talk about them when they're going to these training camps, because it's kind of what you expect. You expect Terry McLaurin and Jahan Dotson to have great years loading. I think Terry McLaurin is potentially going to go for 1,200, 1,300 yards. I don't think he's barely just going to crawl and just barely breach 1,000 yards like he did last year, like he's really been doing his entire career so far, because of terrible quarterback play. With improved quarterback play, with improved offensive coordinator from Cliff Kingsbury as well, I think Terry McLaurin is destined to have 1,200, 1,300 yards. The only reason he wouldn't is because we have so many mouths to feed on offense between the wide receivers, the tight ends, and the running backs. And then on top of that, Jaden Daniels even taking the ball and running with it himself. We already have quarterback design runs like QB draws that Cliff Kingsbury's been drawing up in practice. So expect to see some of that in the regular season. But I'm expecting Terry McLaurin to somehow find a way to get 1,200, 1,300 yards. I'm expecting Jahan Dotson to bounce back and be the best version of himself that we've seen. And Luke McCaffrey, like I've explained in several videos, and I've shown y'all this in a couple of videos, that I mean, he's literally a more athletic Christian McCaffrey. And I know I saw some comps about him being compared to Puka Nacua coming out of the draft, and he could potentially have the same rookie season that Puka Nacua had last year. That's very high praise, but he's definitely more athletic than Puka Nacua. Again, he's even more athletic than Christian McCaffrey. I compared the relative athletic scores between Luke McCaffrey and his brother Christian McCaffrey. As wide receivers, Luke McCaffrey was obviously the better athlete, had the higher score. But even when you switch them both to running backs, make Luke McCaffrey a running back and Christian McCaffrey a running back, which he actually is, Luke McCaffrey still had the higher score. So the potential is limitless. He's only been playing receiver for a couple of years, and he's already as nuanced as he is and already as good of a blocker as he is right now. The sky is the limit for Luke McCaffrey. I'm expecting him to be a big-time contributor very early for this team, man. I've been hearing about his route running improving. I've been seeing clips of him getting open and making catches against really good DBs and things like that. I'm very excited about this receiving group. I wouldn't say I was pessimistic about this receiving group coming into training camp, but I definitely was lower on them coming into training camp than I am right now after day 8 of training camp practices. Now moving on to tight end. If we had to pick one, maybe this may not be obvious to people. I was hoping that Ben Sinnott would give Zach Ertz a good run for his money, but so far it hasn't been the case. Ben Sinnott, He's been making some spectacular catches. I even showed you the clip one time where he made like a one-handed catch when the ball was thrown behind him by Jaden Daniels. Not a great ball from Jaden Daniels. He still found a way to corral it in with one hand behind him. But I've also heard that drops have been plaguing him throughout training camp so far. He's had quite a few drops. He's still learning, but that versatility, you just can't find that everywhere, man. I love Zach Ertz, but Zach Ertz can't step up and play fullback. He can't switch from one play inline tight end to big slot to out wide as a receiver. Like Ben Sinnott can play everywhere that you need him to in the offense, almost basically like a second running back. Sometimes if you want to run shotgun and have two running backs around the quarterback, Ben Sinnott could be one of those guys if you wanted to. Like, he's so versatile. So the ceiling is extremely high. He has a higher ceiling than Zach Ertz, but as of right now, he's not the same player. He's not the same contributor as Zach Ertz. The floor definitely is not as high as what Zach Ertz is right now. Zach Ertz is obviously, and you could argue by far and away, the best tight end we have in the room today. Again, I think Ben Sinnott has the potential, and I was hoping after we drafted him, based off of the tape that I saw, that he would be further ahead in his development today. I mean, you could argue that like Brandon Coleman is further ahead than we expected. Jaden Daniels is further ahead than we expected. Mike Sanders still is everything he was supposed to be, further ahead than he expected. Johnny Newton, I mean, even with the injuries, so far from what I've seen from the couple of practices that he's actually practiced with the teams and heard about and read about as far as he goes, he's probably a little bit of ahead than what people expected. Ben Sinnott is the one guy that it's like he's not quite where we hoped he'd be at this point in the offseason. But again, the ceiling is still ridiculous. I'm very excited about his future. We just may not see the Ben Sinnott that I was hoping we would be seeing by week 1. It may take a couple of games in for him to really get the hang of things and start the ball out for us and maybe take over as tight end 1. He has the potential to be tight end 1, but as of today, Zach Ertz is easily the better tight end. Now, y'all know I'm rooting for my boy Armani Rogers. He's my favorite player in the tight end room. He's one of my 3 favorite players on the entire team that I'm most intrigued by. You got Armani Rogers, Jeremy Chin, and Tyler Owens. Y'all know I'm a fan of the just absolute freak athletes, the aliens that you just can't teach that. You take a guy in the skill set, the natural God-given ability that you can't teach, you coach that guy up with the things that you can teach and turn him into a future Pro Bowler, All-Pro, whatever. And so Armani Rogers, I've been hearing great things, making acrobatic catches, hard to cover, making plays against really anybody that they throw up against them. So I'm assuming he will make the team, but he's not really in contention for tight end 1 right now, to be completely honest. Even as much of a fan as I am of his right now, he's probably tight end 3 or 4, maybe 3 at the very best. Definitely not 2, and for sure not 1. Zach Ertz has it right now. His veteran leadership, Serge the shooter, who's been going to all the practices, he's the one that takes all of the amazing photos, a lot of the amazing photos that we see of the players, like all of the still shots and things like that, great camera angles, all of that type of stuff. He's been going to the practices, I'm not sure literally every day, but I know he's gone to a few, and he said that, hey man, you may want to pick up Zach Ertz on your fantasy team, because right now he's the go-to target for Jaden Daniels. When in doubt, if everything else fails, if everything's chaotic and nobody's open and Jaden Daniels is scrambling and panicking, Zach Ertz is that when in doubt find him, he's usually going to be open for you and make the catch. Zach Ertz, I mean, Logan Paulson even pointed it out as a former tight end. His ability to use leverage, like it's like the nuanced veteran things that it's really hard to have coming out of college that Ben Sinnott should not have at this point. It would be nice if he did, but he more than likely wouldn't. Like the way that he leverages himself against a DB and then uses timing and technique to get open at the very last second, to where if the timing is on point with the quarterback, the chemistry is there, there's literally nothing a defensive back can do because the timing is just too on point. Great offense always beats great defense when it comes to this sport. I mean, it's leverage, it's timing, it's all kinds of nuanced things that, like, it just takes time. It takes years to gain that type of stuff. Zach Ertz didn't have that when he came out of college. Just playing with the Eagles over time and being utilized in their offense and being one of the focal points of the offense, that you just gain those abilities. I'm hoping he can give that game to Ben Sinnott as well, so hopefully we can kind of expedite this development on his end. But Zach Ertz, as of today, is obviously your best tight end. Now moving on to center, let's get to this offensive line. Tyler Biadasz, obviously your starting center. Not really much to talk about there. Clearly and easily your best center. Even though Michael Dieter is a pretty decent backup, I feel like that's a pretty underrated signing because he could start on a couple of offensive lines out here in the NFL. To have him as a backup center is immense because we're going from a terrible center group last year that was very injury prone to a way better center group. You could argue that our backup center right now, Michael Dieter, should have been a starter for us last year. That's how much our center position has improved. That's how much a lot of our position groups have improved. Where backups on this team that Adam Peters and Dan Quinn are leading would have been starters on Ron Rivera's team. Like it's a lot of different position groups like that. Center is no different. Tyler Biadasz is just that good. Now we brought in Tyler Biadasz first of all because he's a top 10 center, arguably a top 5 center in the NFL, depending on how you feel about his tape and his time with the Cowboys. But the main reason that it's not just because he's good, it's because specifically he's a veteran, he's seasoned. So when in doubt, if Jaden Daniels was not ready to handle a lot of pre-snap things like changing protections at the line, IDing potential blitzers, audibles and things like that, Tyler Biadasz could have been a great bridge for him to kind of like, all right, Jaden Daniels, just focus on throwing the ball and using your athleticism. Don't worry about the mental stuff too much, especially pre-snap. Maybe post-snap, yeah, but pre-snap, let Tyler Biadasz handle that. But luckily for us, Jaden Daniels is so far in advance and just ahead of where he's supposed to be. We don't even need Tyler Biadasz to necessarily do that. Now he's kind of like the backup plan. Like, Jaden Daniels, you seeing what I'm seeing? Yeah, I'm seeing what you're seeing. We're good to go. Check. Let's hike this ball type of situation. So Tyler Biadasz, I love that signing. One of the best signings this entire offseason. I feel like it's very underrated. It was basically like a safety blanket. When in doubt, if Jaden Daniels is not ready to handle a lot of the mental nuance pre-snap things, Tyler Biadasz would have been your guy to do that. The fact that Jaden Daniels is already ready, now you have Tyler Biadasz that can do it as well. Now we have two of them, the quarterback and the center. Is going to be beautiful. I'm not expecting us to have a lot of situations where like the offense seems to be caught off guard by the defense. I feel like we're going to be able to mind read, evaluate, and adjust a lot quite often, and Tyler Biadasz is going to be a big part of that, because just in case if Jaden Daniels misses something, Tyler Biadasz is here to kind of check him, like, hey man, from my experience, you know, this is what I've been doing for a while, you may want to look at it this way. So hey man, Tyler Biadasz, who knows, is probably the reason that Jaden Daniels, well, at least one of the reasons. I'm pretty sure Jaden Daniels' work ethic, and even from his time with LSU, he was already doing a lot of stuff like that, but I'm pretty sure Tyler Biadasz has given Jaden Daniels a few pointers here and there about a lot of pre-snap stuff that's going to be big time. Then your guard, Samuel Cosmi, loading up all pro season. I think easily Pro Bowl, but Pro Football Focus, I believe they said that he was like the second or third best guard in the NFL already going into the season. I'm just as high on Samuel Cosmi as they are. I think he's all pro written all over him. Like I said, I've been saying it for months now. Samuel Cosmi was the best player on our team last year, easily. I wouldn't necessarily say it wasn't close, but I feel like it's very definitive. I don't feel like it was very close at all. Especially the second half of last season, he was the best player on our team. Once him and Andrew Wiley finally got that chemistry down on that right side, Andrew Wiley went from being terrible to decent. And then Samuel Cosmi went from being good with great flashes to the best player on the team that second half of the season. That right side was pretty much on lockdown to basically end the season, just in general. But Samuel Cosmi, man, at right guard, pay him now. Because I'm saying, Pro Bowl, All Pro season loading up right now. You may want to go ahead and get that out the way before the price skyrockets up. Today's price will not be tomorrow's price for Samuel Cosmi's long-term contract. Get that out the way. Now, y'all have to see the signs, Adam Peters, Brandon Sosna, Dan Quinn. Y'all have to see the clues right now that this guy is going to be a great piece of the offense and really the future of this franchise, man. Please make sure you do not allow him to leave this offseason, no matter which of this next offseason. Then Nick Allegretti probably has that left guard spot solidified. Dan Quinn even said a few days ago that, like, really outside of center and right guard, the offensive line is pretty much wide open, but he also went on to add that left guard is probably the closest to being named the next spot that's already solidified. We already have our starter there, and that would be Nick Allegretti, who's coming from the Chiefs. Now, he hasn't really started a lot of games in his career. He's been a backup for them, but then due to injuries, he was thrown into the starting role for their playoff and Super Bowl run last year. Then he had to play the Super Bowl hurt, like really hurt bad, like in a situation where if it weren't the Super Bowl, he wouldn't have played in that game. He should not have played in that game, but he still played well. And so far from what I'm hearing in practices, he's everything that they hoped he'd be. And they basically feel like the Chiefs were tripping for him not already being a starter. But hey, the Chiefs just had really good offensive line depth. Remember that Tampa Bay Buccaneers Super Bowl where they lost? The whole reason was because their offensive line was terrible. They completely turned that whole franchise around and completely utilized every resource they could to build up that offensive line to the point that they had backups like Nick Allegretti who could be starting on other teams. So even though he was a backup for the Chiefs, that does not mean he will not be a good starting left guard for us. I'm very excited about him. And when in doubt, our interior offensive line group is very deep. We could talk about the tackle position that we may have some worries about, but like Michael Dieter is a backup interior offensive lineman, center type of guy. Chris Paul even as a backup interior offensive lineman. I feel like we're in good hands. And Nick Allegretti, I feel like he earned that job over Chris Paul and those other guys. And then also, lastly, we have the tackles. Andrew Wiley, this one's a weird one because he's been hurt lately. So like you've been seeing Trent Scott getting first team reps with Andrew Wiley out. And I don't know how much to read into that, but Trent Scott has been your starting right tackle, at least for the last practice or two, because Cornelius Lucas missed 2 practices ago. But last practice, even though he was there, he was with the second stringers at right tackle. So I'm assuming that nobody really, unless they're ready to announce that Trent Scott is winning the right tackle battle. I think once Andrew Wiley comes back and is healthy, he's going to win that job. For if anything, not even necessarily because how good he is, but again, I want to really emphasize, I can't emphasize it enough, how much chemistry matters in the offensive line group. For my example that I keep bringing up, you can sign 5 future Hall of Famers in one offseason from 5 different teams, and at week 1, they may go out there and allow a couple of sacks because chemistry matters. So much when it comes to the offensive line, man. It's a huge component of it. And that's why it took until halfway through the season for Samuel Cosmi to start playing at an all-pro level and for Andrew Wiley to start playing at least a decent, slightly above average level, you could even say. He was terrible the first half of the season. I'm with y'all on that. But I feel like a lot of people are overlooking how much he improved the second half of last season. I feel like most of that was chemistry and comfortability in the offense within itself, and knowing the guy to the left of you, and for Samuel Cosmi's case, knowing the guy to the left and right of you, and finally getting some chemistry and continuity going there. Offensive line is probably the most dependent on continuity out of any position group on the entire team, you could argue. And so I feel like Andrew Wiley may just make this team because Samuel Cosmi's more comfortable with him on the right side. Now, granted, again, with Andrew Wiley missing practice, maybe Samuel Cosmi's growing some chemistry with guys like Trent Scott or Cornelius Lucas in practice right now. But I think Andrew Wiley, when he comes back, is probably still has the lead for the starting right tackle position. More so, not even because of his ability, but because of how he brings basically the better out of Samuel Cosmi to his right side. Then Brandon Coleman got left tackle. They haven't announced it yet, but he's been your start. He was starting sporadically throughout the first few training camp practices, and they would give him shots like maybe one play here, maybe one session of 11-on-11s here. But the past 3 days, he's been your starting left tackle and hasn't moved. There were points in periods of time in training camp where he was like the starting left tackle occasionally. He was a starting right tackle. He may be the backup left tackle, backup right tackle. Last 3-4 practices, maybe even 5, he's been purely the starting left tackle and hasn't moved. He was the best player the first day we did one-on-ones 2 practices ago. I believe that was day 7 of training camp. The first day that we did one-on-ones, literally everybody that was there, even Dan Quinn after practice, before the next practice in his press conference, because he doesn't speak after practice. He speaks about the previous practice the morning before the very next one. He even talked about how Brandon Coleman was literally the most impressive player in one-on-ones. And when we're talking about most impressive player, we're not just talking about offensive line. We're talking about offensive linemen, 1v1s versus defensive linemen. So that's including Jonathan Allen, Deron Payne, Johnny Newton, all of these guys. Brandon Coleman looked like the best player out there, but it wasn't just 1v1s, because the sport of football is not 1v1s. As an offensive tackle, you need to be ready to pass on stunts. You need to have chemistry with the guy next to you for a lot of different things. It's not just a bunch of one-on-one matchups all game. That's not how the sport is played. So yeah, you're great in 1v1s, and that's still big time that he was the biggest standout player from 1v1s, with Samuel Cosme as a close second, who only got beat, I believe, one time, people said. But Brandon Coleman never got beat the entire time they had the one-on-one sessions. But then even when they moved to 11-on-11s, he was beautiful, great. He got beat on a couple of inside moves like 3 practices ago. The 2 practices ago, he adjusted, he adapted, and then last practice, he continued that momentum of looking like a true starting left tackle for us. It looks like he has that spot solidified. Dan Quinn hasn't announced it yet, but he's showing it through reps that Brandon Coleman is probably a starting left tackle, and we want to get him as many snaps out there with the starters versus starting defensive linemen that we can get, so that he can be as ready as possible by the time we get the week 1 versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And so now, if y'all want to see the starting offense in one picture, here you go right here. Again, this is basic 11 personnel. You have starting offensive line going from Brandon Coleman to Nick Allegretti to Tyler Biadasz, Samuel Cosme, and then Andrew Wiley. Then you have Zach Ertz as your tight end close to the line, I'm assuming. Then your wide receivers, Terry McLaurin on the island by himself on the other side. Luke McCaffrey in the slot, and then Jahan Dotson as your Z receiver. Of course, Jaden Daniels is your quarterback, and then Austin Eckler is your running back. And that is your starting offense as of today, August 3rd. But again, I really want to re-emphasize the fact that this can definitely change by the time we get to week 1. Ben Sinnott could suddenly just skyrocket in development and take over Zach Ertz, because again, he has a higher ceiling with his versatility that Zach Ertz could never have. Ben Sinnott has the potential to be a better player, but as of today, Zach Ertz is easily the better player right now. Definitively, there's no debate there, but you never know. Maybe something clicks in Ben Sinnott's head to where by week 1, he's the starting tight end. You just never know. Maybe somebody dethrones Andrew Wiley at right tackle. Who knows? Maybe Brian Robinson stops fumbling and develops and shows that he does have a higher ceiling than Austin Eckler at this point in Austin Eckler's career. With him only getting older, he's not the quickest guy. He's not the strongest guy. Brian Robinson has the higher ceiling, but right now, Austin Eckler is the better back so far from what we've seen in training camp. He's the more dependable, he's the more nuanced back, and I mean, even just pass protection wise, picking up a blitz against Bobby Wagner to allow Jaden Daniels to throw a deep bomb touchdown to Terry McLaurin. It's little things that end up mattering big time and having big results and consequences. And so Austin Eckler, you're the starting running back right now, but again, things could change. Maybe Brian Robinson becomes a better pass protector. Maybe Brian Robinson learns how to protect the ball more and stop letting people punch it from behind, and then he would technically, in my opinion, be the better running back between the two. But right now, Austin Eckler is easily the safer option from what we've seen. Zach Ertz is safer. Austin Eckler is safer. But the young guys behind them with higher ceilings have, more potential to them. And hopefully those guys surpass them sooner rather than later. But as of right now, they have not. But yeah, man, that's the end of this video. Please get in the comment section. Let me know how you feel about everything discussed in this video. Please stiff arm that like button, stiff arm the subscription button, stiff arm the bell next to that subscription button so you get notification each and every time I release an informative and opinionated video just like this one. Make sure you stay tuned for all of the content, man. I really appreciate y'all for staying tuned and supporting every video. Shouts out to all of y'all for congratulating me for the new sponsor. Much love to all of y'all. Really appreciate that. Again, make sure you leave a like on this video. Do not leave a like. Do not leave this video without leaving a like. My fault. No, don't listen to the do not leave a like part. No, do not leave this video without leaving a like. That's my bad. Also, make sure y'all let me know in the comment section how you feel about everything discussed discussed in this video. Do you agree or disagree with any of my points that I made? Like any of the players I picked, do you agree or disagree? Do you agree or disagree with any of the logic on any of the points that I brought up? Let me know that in the comment section. I'm gonna try my best to read and reply to as many comments as I can, but I'm already working on my next video because we don't have practice today, so I felt like this is a good opportunity to get a video out by early afternoon and then another one later on tonight. So make sure you stay tuned for that as well. I really appreciate y'all. I'm gonna catch y'all later. I'm out.